the real reason they stopped calling, and how to be okay with it. Is the silence from someone you once loved the path to inevitable heartbreak, or could it lead to unexpected liberation? Many believe that maintaining connection with a romantic partner guarantees happiness and fulfillment. But what happens when messages go unanswered and calls unreturned? The teachings of Zen and Buddhism suggest a profound truth. Our reaction to romantic silence reveals more about us than the one who's withdrawn. Gautama Buddha once said, "Attachment leads to suffering." Could it be that our attachment to romantic responses, validation, and connection might be the very source of our pain? Let us explore this question through the lens of Zen wisdom. 1. The desire for response. A man named Takeshi had cultivated a loving relationship with Mei for many years. Their connection began with passionate exchanges, thoughtful messages, and long conversations that extended into the night. Each text received was a confirmation of their bond, each call a thread in the tapestry of their shared existence. But as seasons changed, he noticed a gradual shift in their communication. Mei, who once responded within minutes, now took hours or days to reply. Calls that once lasted for hours became brief exchanges of practical information. Takeshi felt the emptiness of disconnection creeping into his soul. He thought to himself, "Perhaps I should reach out more meaningfully. She must be busy, but surely she'll respond if I express my feelings more clearly." Isn't it natural to expect reciprocity from someone you love? So he crafted longer messages, made more frequent calls, and his anxiety grew with each unanswered attempt at connection. Little did he know that this very approach would soon begin to unravel the peace he sought. 2. The illusion of control. In the first few attempts, Takeshi felt hopeful. His heartfelt messages occasionally received warm responses. His extra calls sometimes connected them momentarily. He felt temporarily reassured that their bond remained intact, that his place in Mei's life was secure. But slowly, subtle changes began to occur, changes he did not immediately recognize. Mei's responses became shorter, more distant. Video calls were replaced by voice calls, then by messages, then by silence. The connection he desperately tried to maintain seemed to slip through his fingers like water. The more he grasped, the faster it flowed away. The control he thought he had over their relationship began to reveal itself as an illusion. He found himself constantly checking his phone, analyzing read receipts, and crafting perfect messages that might finally elicit the loving response he craved. The happiness he thought would come from reconnection began to fade. He felt like an outsider in a life that once included him, not understanding why the distance had grown despite his increased efforts. One night, after another evening spent staring at unanswered messages, he sat in meditation, contemplating his feelings. He remembered the Buddha's words, "You only lose what you cling to." He began to wonder, am I too attached to her responses? Have I placed my peace of mind in Mei's hands, expecting her to fulfill my need for validation and love? 3. The weight of expectations. As time went on, Takeshi began to feel a sense of resentment. He had always been there for Mei, responding quickly, offering support, and prioritizing their connection. Now, in his time of need, shouldn't she reciprocate with the same attention and care? This expectation weighed heavily on his heart. He could not understand why she seemed distant, why she did not prioritize him as he had prioritized her. The bitterness grew, and with it, his suffering intensified. He often found himself thinking, why do I even bother reaching out if I'm to be ignored? Is this how our love ends? Not with a conversation, but with silence. But one night during a restless sleep, he dreamt of a wise Zen master. The master said to him, "You are clinging to an idea that she must fulfill your desires. The more you expect from her, the more you will suffer. True peace does not come from her responses, it comes from within." When he awoke, Takeshi pondered the words of the master. He realized he had placed unrealistic expectations on their relationship. He had assumed that his effort would automatically result in reciprocal engagement. Yet even though he reached out persistently, May's life and priorities remained separate from his. He had expected her to fill the void of his insecurity. But was this really her responsibility? 4. The realization of attachment. The more Takeshi meditated on his situation, the more he understood the nature of his suffering. It was not May's silence that caused his pain. It was his own attachment to her responses and his belief that she owed him attention. In his heart, he had placed his sense of worth and happiness in her hands, forgetting the teachings of detachment he had once known. He had allowed himself to believe that constant connection would preserve their love, but in truth, it had only deepened his longing and intensified his sense of rejection when that connection did not meet his expectations. He recalled another teaching of Gautama Buddha. Nothing is yours. You cannot hold on to anything. Everything is temporary. This relationship too was not his to possess. May had her own life, challenges, and transformation. By clinging to previous patterns of interaction, he was attempting to hold on to something that naturally evolves and changes over time. 5. The dangers of dependence. Takeshi began to see another danger in his situation. By fixating on May's responses, he had inadvertently become dependent on them for his emotional well-being. He found himself waiting for her messages to feel worthy, relying on her validation to feel complete. But in doing so, he had lost his own independence. He had allowed himself to become emotionally dependent on external validation, and when she did not provide the attention he desired, he felt abandoned. He remembered a story told by a Buddhist monk long ago. In the story, a vine had grown so entwined with a tree that it could no longer stand on its own. When the tree was cut down, the vine withered because it had forgotten how to reach for the sun itself. Takeshi realized that he had been like that vine, dependent on May's responses for emotional nourishment. He had expected her to carry the burden of his self-worth, but in doing so, he had weakened his own ability to find peace within himself. 6. The path to inner peace. It was during a quiet afternoon, as Takeshi sat in meditation under the shade of a cherry tree, that the final realization came to him. He understood that loving May had not been the mistake. The mistake had been his attachment to the idea that her responses were responsible for his happiness. True peace, he realized, comes not from others, but from within oneself. He remembered the Buddhist teaching. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. May, no matter how much she had once loved him, could not provide him with the inner contentment he sought. That could only come from his own heart, from his own ability to let go of expectations and embrace the present moment as it was, not as he wished it to be. Takeshi decided to change his perspective. Instead of measuring his self-worth by the frequency of May's responses, he began to cultivate a sense of gratitude for the connection they once shared. He stopped evaluating his days by her messages and instead focused on the simple joys of his daily life, the beauty of nature, the pleasure of solitary activities, and the quiet moments of meditation that brought him closer to his own heart. 7. The freedom of letting go. As Takeshi continued on his journey of self-reflection, he felt a profound sense of freedom. By letting go of his attachment to May's responses, he had released the weight of expectation and the suffering that came with it. He no longer felt the need to control their communication or demand her attention. Instead, he allowed her to make her own choices, while he focused on living his own life with peace and contentment. In time, something unexpected happened. May reached out, not in the way he had once desperately hoped, but with a simple message of appreciation for the space he had given her. When they did communicate, the interaction felt more genuine, because Takeshi no longer approached it with desperate need or hidden resentment. Takeshi, having freed himself from the chains of attachment, found that he could appreciate their occasional exchanges even more because he was no longer dependent on them for his happiness. Each message became a gift, rather than an obligation or expectation. 8. The lesson of impermanence. Takeshi's journey brought him back to one of the core teachings of Buddhism, the lesson of impermanence. Everything in life is transient: our youth, our relationships, our very identities. Clinging to any relationship, no matter how meaningful, only leads to suffering because all things are bound to change. He understood now that his relationship with May had changed because change is the only constant in life. People evolve, feelings transform, and circumstances shift. By accepting this impermanence, he found peace in the knowledge that change is natural and inevitable. Gautama Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent. Strive on with diligence. Takeshi reflected on this deeply, realizing that his relationship with May was a conditioned thing, built from attraction, shared experiences, and complementary needs that had since transformed. The nature of love itself transforms as we grow and change. He had his own path to walk, just as May had hers. 9. Finding joy in solitude. Once Takeshi embraced the wisdom of impermanence and let go of the attachments that had weighed him down, he discovered a new kind of joy, one that arose from solitude. Solitude, he realized, was not the same as loneliness. Loneliness was the craving for her presence, whereas solitude was the contentment that came from within, the peace found in one's own company. He began to relish the quiet moments he spent alone, whether practicing calligraphy, taking long walks, or sitting in meditation. He no longer waited for May to fill his days with meaning. Instead, he filled them with his own pursuits and spiritual practice. The occasional messages they exchanged became an added joy rather than a necessity for his happiness. The teachings of Zen emphasized the importance of being present in the moment, of finding contentment in what is rather than what could be. Takeshi embodied this teaching. He lived fully in the present, appreciating life's small wonders. His joy no longer depended on May's attention, but on his inner state of being. 10. The wisdom of non-attachment. As Takeshi continued to reflect on his journey, he understood more deeply the wisdom of non-attachment. Buddhism teaches that attachment to people, outcomes, or even ideas inevitably leads to suffering because nothing in this world remains unchanged. The more we cling to a relationship, the more we suffer when it inevitably shifts. He saw now that his suffering had not come from May's silence, but from his attachment to the idea that she owed him her attention. When that expectation wasn't met, he felt hurt and abandoned. But in truth, May had not abandoned him. She was simply living her life according to her own needs and circumstances. His suffering had come from his own clinging, his inability to accept the changing nature of their connection. By practicing non-attachment, Takeshi freed himself from the emotional turmoil that had plagued him. He no longer felt disappointed or resentful when messages went unanswered. Instead, he accepted each moment as it came, without longing for more or fearing less. 11. The full circle of connection. In the months that followed, Takeshi realized that his journey had come full circle. Just as he had once defined himself through his relationship with May, he now cultivated his relationship with himself. His sense of worth no longer depended on her validation, but grew from his own inner knowing. Zen Buddhism teaches that life moves in cycles, each with its own lessons. Takeshi's cycle of romantic attachment had come to a natural end, and a new cycle of self-discovery and inner peace had begun. He was no longer defined by his relationship status or bound by the expectations that had once caused him so much pain. He was simply a human being walking the path of life with grace and acceptance. 12. The legacy of peace. As Takeshi continued on his path, he felt a profound sense of peace. His relationship with Mei had transformed, not because they reconnected in the way he once desperately wanted, but because he had let go of his need for control and allowed authentic connection to flow when it naturally arose. One day, they met by chance in a cafe. Their conversation flowed easily, without the weight of expectations or resentment. When they parted ways, he did not feel the familiar ache of longing. He knew that connection was not measured by frequency or intensity, but by the quality of presence in each moment. He understood that every person walks their own path, encountering their own struggles and transformations. Sometimes these paths converge, sometimes they diverge. Both are natural parts of life's journey. In his moments of reflection, Takeshi considered the lessons he had learned, the dangers of attachment, the importance of non-dependence, and the profound peace that comes from within. He had found a fulfilling life not by clinging to Mei or seeking validation from her, but by finding contentment in each moment and accepting the impermanence of all things. The story of Takeshi reminds us that true happiness does not come from controlling others' responses or depending on romantic validation for emotional support. Instead, it comes from embracing the teachings of Zen and Buddhism, letting go of attachment, practicing non-dependence, and finding peace within oneself. As Gautama Buddha said, "You yourself must strive." The Buddhas only point the way. The path to peace when someone stops calling is not found in desperate attempts to re-establish contact, but in our own hearts and minds. Takeshi, having walked this path, discovered that the greatest mistake is not when someone stops reaching out, but when we allow their silence to define our worth and happiness. Thank you for watching. I hope this video has offered some comfort and insight if you're currently experiencing someone's silence in your life. Don't forget to subscribe to Moon Mind Temple for more content exploring the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern challenges. Until next time, may you find peace within yourself, regardless of who is or isn't calling.